Thank you. Hi. So for everybody that watched us do our introduction out there, thanks for coming early. If you're just showing up, again, I'm the Assistant Bear Program Coordinator for Florida Fish and Wildlife. And essentially, I'm in charge of lots of the field response. And I have a handful of area bear biologists who I supervise. One of them is down here. Her name is Sarah. Where are you, Sarah?
Over here, Mike.
Okay, so Sarah is our local area bear biologist. Yeah, she does a lot of the groundwork down here, and she is your local contact. So again, if you do have HOA meetings and questions and talks that you want, Sarah's the person to get a hold of. So anyway, we're here to talk about bears, and it's interesting. Lots of people like bears. Some people hate bears, but most people like bears, even if they hate them. It's an interesting conundrum. But a lot of people don't know the specifics in science and biology behind bears, and I'm hoping to help demystify bears just a little bit tonight for you all. Just a show of hands, how many folks actually have bears in their yard or they've seen bears? Oh, a lot. Wow. Okay. So it's probably 90% of the crowd has actually had bears in their yards. So that's good. Okay. So hopefully I can help out a little bit here, trying to help decode or demystify some of bear biology and behavior. All right. So first things first, I may have to get closer to the thing. There it goes. All right. Oh, too much now. All right. So first thing is we only have black bears here in the state of Florida. If you see a polar bear or a brown bear running through your neighborhood, please call us immediately. That is not supposed to be happening, and y'all laugh, but we had a brown bear escape a couple of years ago, and we end up having to go catch him and put him back in his cage. So that is a possibility. So we only have black bears in the state, and they are a subspecies. We have 16 subspecies of black bears. Ours is Ursus americanus floridanus. There's one in Louisiana, and there's a couple in the Northeast and out west. But we have the Florida black bear, which is a subspecies of the American black bear. It's not really a big deal. Back in 1912, there was a guy named Miramum who would actually be able, if you put a whole bunch of black bear skulls on a table, he would actually be able to tell you with some confidence where those skulls came from around the United States. We actually don't build people like that anymore for some reason. And he was a very smart guy. And that taxonomy is how we got these subspecies. And now, of course, we've moved into genetics, and that's helping us do some separation of bears and lumping of bears, for that matter. So to talk about bear biology a little bit, we have very large bears in Florida. So I will give you all that we have small deer. We'll own that. And that is actually due to a rule called Bergmans Rule. Anybody in here know what Bergmans Rule is? Oh, good. I'm going to drop some knowledge on you. All right. So except for the biologists, you can't raise your hands. So Bergmans Rule is essentially dictates on how big you are compared to the latitude of where you live. And so deer follow Bergmans Rule. It's not Bergman's law for a reason, right? Because bears break the rule. So if all the animals, all the critters followed, it would be Bergman's law, but they don't. It's called Bergman's Rule because there's only a handful of species that follow it. So get this, if you're a deer and you live in Pennsylvania, you're a big, heavy-bodied deer. You got good food resources, and you need to pack on some weight to make it through the food shortage and the cold weather in the wintertime, right? Well, if you're a deer down in Big Pine Key, how many folks have seen the key deer in Big Pine Key? Oh, good. Yeah, we got a lot of animal folks in here. So you go down there, and these deer are like this big, right? Well, that's because it's really hot, right? So if you took a key deer and you put him up in Pennsylvania, it would freeze to death. And if you took a Pennsylvania deer and you put them down in big pine tea, it would overheat and die. And so this is a phenomenon of the latitude on which you live, right? Bears completely ignore the rule. It's about surface area, right? So if you have more surface area, you stay warmer in the wintertime. Well, in Pennsylvania, we have very large bears, 600-pound bears, 700-pound bears. And in Florida, we have 600 and 700-pound bears. In fact, our state record is 760 pounds. Now, I have a friend who catches brown bears out in Montana, and now these are interior brown bears. They're grizzlies, we call them grizzlies as well out there. And but these are interior brown bears, and she says that the largest brown bear she's ever caught out there was 540 pounds. So I'm always teasing her about how our black bears are bigger than her brown bears. I'm sure some of them have gotten much bigger than that out there, but I get the needle her a little bit. So we actually have very large bears here in Florida. And in fact, this is the 760-pound bear. And there's a little camera trickery going. Unfortunately, he was hit by a car, and we had to euthanize him due to his injuries. But it's still such an impressive animal at 760 pounds. He's the bear that you don't go, oh my gosh, look how beautiful that bear is. He's the bear that you tinkle a little bit, right? You're like, holy cow, look at the size of that bear, right? And so we do have really large bears, and I don't want anybody to think that we don't. So I spent a little time on that. So the other thing, bears have extremely good senses of smell. And in fact, it's estimated they have the best sense of smell in the entire animal kingdom, except for like some little copepod or something that lives in the ocean, and we don't care about those. So, Tim probably does, but my critter eats those critters, right? So we're okay. But if you look at this picture that's up there, those little white specks on the mountainside, those are polar bears. This happened in Russia not too long ago. I think it was last year or just the year before. And they were finding that some of these polar bears were traveling like 70 miles to get to this rotting whale carcass on the coast. So the funny thing about bears is they don't have cell phones. And they don't text each other that, hey, there's a rotting whale carcass on the coast, party at, the rotting whale carcass. So they have to have some mechanism of figuring out how to get to it. And their sense of smell is just incredible. I'm going to show you a TED Talk here in just a second. And this is about dogs. But remember what Tim said out there. A bear's sense of smell is 7 times better than our best dog. Okay, so think when you're watching this video, because she does, by the way, she does a much better job explaining this whole thing than I do. So I'm going to let her do it, and but it's really incredible if you think about it. And we'll go through a little exercise afterwards. Uh-oh. How did that happen? Oh, there it is. There it is. Sorry.
Hi, Bob. Morning, Kelly. The tulips look great. Have you ever wondered how your dog experiences the world? Here's what she sees. Not terribly interesting. But what she smells, that's a totally different story. And it begins at her wonderfully developed nose. As your dog catches the first hints of fresh air, her nose's moist, spongy outside helps capture any sense the breeze carries. The ability to smell separately with each nostril, smelling in stereo, helps to determine the direction of the smell's source, so that within the first few moments of sniffing, the dog starts to become aware of not just what kinds of things are out there, but also where they're located. As air enters the nose, a small fold of tissue divides it into 2 separate folds, one for breathing and one just for smelling. This second airflow enters a region filled with highly specialized olfactory receptor cells, several hundred millions of them, compared to our 5 million. And unlike our clumsy way of breathing in and out through the same passage, dogs exhale through slits at the side of their nose, creating swirls of air that help draw in new odor molecules and allow odor concentration to build up over multiple sniffs. But all that impressive nasal architecture wouldn't be much help without something to process the loads of information the nose scoops up. And it turns out that the olfactory system, dedicated to processing smells, takes up many times more relative brain area in dogs than in humans. All of this allows dogs to distinguish and remember a staggering variety of specific scents at concentrations up to 100 million times less than what our noses can detect. If you can smell a spritz of perfume in a small room, a dog would have no trouble smelling it in an enclosed stadium and distinguishing its ingredients to boot. And everything in the street, every passing person or car, any contents of the neighbor's trash, each type of tree, and all the birds and insects in it, has a distinct odor profile telling your dog what it is, where it is, and which direction it's moving in. Besides being much more powerful than ours, a dog's sense of smell can pick up things that can't even be seen at all. A whole separate olfactory system, called the vomeronasal organ, above the roof of the mouth, detects the hormones all animals, including humans, naturally release. It lets dogs identify potential mates or distinguish between friendly and hostile animals. It alerts them to our various emotional states, and it can even tell them when someone is pregnant or sick. Because olfaction is more primal than other senses, bypassing the thalamus to connect directly to the brain structures involving emotion and instinct, we might even say a dog's perception is more immediate and visceral than ours. But the most amazing thing about your dog's nose is that it can traverse time. The past appears in tracks left by passers-by and by the warmth of a recently parked car, or the residue of where you've been and what you've done recently. Landmarks like fire hydrants and trees are aromatic bulletin boards carrying messages of who's been by, what they've been eating, and how they're feeling. And the future is in the breeze, alerting them to something or someone approaching long before you see them. Where we see and hear something at a single moment, a dog smells an entire story, from start to finish. In some of the best examples of canine-human collaboration, dogs help us by sharing and reacting to those stories. They can respond with kindness to people in distress, or with aggression to threats, because stress and anger manifest as a cloud of hormones recognizable to the dog's nose. With the proper training, they can even alert us to invisible threats, ranging from bombs to cancer. As it turns out, humanity's best friend is not one who experiences the same things we do, but one whose incredible nose reveals a whole other world beyond our eyes.
Okay, so again, she does a much better job of explaining all that architecture, of the nose, the TED Talks I think are great. So it's hard for humans to possibly imagine being able to smell a spritz of perfume in an enclosed stadium and distinguishing the ingredients, right? Which your dog can do. That's incredible. And I try to the best I can, because their sense of smell is the reason why we have conflicts, essentially, right? They could smell your garbage, they could smell your cat food and dog food, and they could smell it for black bears in Florida up to a mile, maybe 10 miles away. So it's extremely important to understand why we're having these conflicts, and their sense of smell is where it is. So one of the things I try to do to get you to just somewhat understand, because it's so hard for us to do, is pick something in the room. So let's if everybody could see this painting right here behind me, the black bear. Can everybody see that? All right, so there's a black bear painting right here behind me, okay? Actually, here, this would be even better. So here's a bottle, okay? So I want everybody in here to look at that bottle. Now, what you've just done by looking at that bottle is actually incredible. You've done something amazing just right then. And what you've done is you've isolated this bottle from the other 20 million things in this stadium. There's all this stuff around here, but you are able to isolate this bottle with your eyes. Now, if you're a bear, you can isolate this bottle and the contents that are in it with your nose. You can ignore all the folks out here who are probably, well, let me see. If you have really bad perfume on, or you haven't showered in days, a bear can ignore all of you, everything that's gone on in the stage, the animals that's been here before, and just smell this bottle. That's incredible. It's hard for us to even imagine. Think about a search and rescue dog who gets the smell of like a hairbrush or a shirt for a lost kid in the woods. And that dog puts its nose to the ground, and if you imagine you're the dog for a second, what would we do? We would stick our nose in there and we'd sniff in and we'd get a nose full of dirt and we would go choking and, running for, the bathroom. But a dog can put its nose on the ground, ignore the other dogs that are there, the people's scent, the raccoons that were there 2 days before, the deer that have walked by, the insects, the dirt, the grass, everything. It can ignore that, isolate that smell of the kid, and then not just right there, but follow it a mile through the forest where thousands of other deer have passed by, or, all the insects, everything. Don't worry about that. It's just a vortex into the black hole over there. And just follow this trail, this light scent trail that may be days old, and discover some lost kid in the woods. It's mind-boggling to even think that's possible, but they can. They could do that, and bears could do it 7 times better. So that's really why we have most of our conflicts in the state, is because bears are so good at smelling things. So the other thing about bears is they are habitat generalists. They don't like to live in the swamp. They don't like to live in the scrub. They like to live right where we like to plant houses. And so we have bears and people. Remember, we have 21 million people in the state now, right? And where we have houses, we're going to have bears in a lot of the parts where, bears have historically been. In a place like up near Longwood, where you see the lady on the bike with her kid, this is a common occurrence, happens every day. Bears walking through somebody's yard, and they're just going from one place to another, not really even engaging with people or trash. They're just trying to get from one part of the forest to the other. We just happen to have houses all over the place. A black bear has a male black bear has a 60 square mile home range on average. They have huge home ranges, and females have around 12 square miles on average. Can anybody in here tell me why a male would have a 60 square mile home range and a female would have a 12 square mile home range? Right, males are looking for females. That's essentially right. So they're trying to incorporate as many females in their home range as possible, and the females have smaller home ranges because they're trying to incorporate the highest quality food in the forest for rearing their cubs. Breeding occurs in June and July. So I'm sort of getting through the seasonality of bears now. Breeding occurs in June and July. They experience what's called delayed implantation. If you don't know what delayed implantation is, it's amazing. If you go home and Google it, and you'll learn everything you want to know about it. But essentially, the sperm fertilizes the egg. It floats around. It splits into about 100 or 200 and something cells, stops growing, and just sits in the uterus in suspended animation. Now, there may be multiple fertilized eggs in there. These are called blastocysts. And then what happens is, now they're pregnant. They get pregnant in June and July, but they actually don't start growing the baby until December in utero. So they're pregnant for 7 months. But during the period that they're pregnant, they go through what's called fall hyperphagia. Hyperphagia is just a fancy term for overeating in the fall, where normally they're trying to get around 5,000 to 10,000 calories a day. In the fall, they're usually trying to get around 20 to 30,000 calories a day, just preparing for wintertime. Now, a bunch of you are saying, but bears don't hibernate in Florida. Yes, they do. In fact, it's part of the birthing process. If there wasn't a hibernation period, they wouldn't actually be able to have cubs. Now, it's different than Puxatawny Phil and those other ones that literally go to sleep and you can shake them and they won't wake up. If you shake a bear in hibernation, it's probably going to swat you in the head. They don't go quite as deep, although if you go and take a look at your bears, they're quite lethargic right now. And really, it's not about the cold weather. Cold weather triggers it, but it's the food availability that drives it. So if they can't find food, so hibernation is a product of the food shortage, not necessarily the cold weather, okay? So what happens is they try, in the fall, where we have most of our conflicts because they're trying to eat so many calories in a day, they're trying to get fattened up for the winter, preparing for the food shortage. Then they'll build a den. They'll pull in these great big, are your bears denning? Are they pulling in all kinds of stuff? Yeah, so if you get a chance to look at the bears during the daytime, they'll probably see, a lot of stuff pulled in. But they make these great big bird's nests essentially on the ground. And if you ever find one in the woods, do not lay in it because it's full of ticks. Don't ask me how I know that. So they'll pull all this stuff together late December, early January. And then what happens is all bear cubs are born around February 1st. So right now, we're almost there. So as the female builds her den, she lays down, those blastocysts I talk about, they actually start to settle on the uterine wall, and then they'll grow. And how many cubs she has actually depends on how fit and fat she is going in the winter. So if she has a big, fat, female bear, she may have 3 cubs. On average, we have 2 here in Florida because our food quality isn't as great as some of the states up north. But generally, they're about the size of a Coke can. We have 2 on average, but sometimes we do have 3. The cubs stay with mom in the den until they're about 5 pounds, and then she'll start to slowly expand her home range and actually teach them everything they need to know small, and then she'll actually start to expand the home range large enough that incorporates her own home range over a period of 1.5 years. So they stay with them for 1.5 years, and then they may actually den with the female in the next winter. So not always, but they will, most of the time, den with her the second winter. Now, in the next breeding season as it's approaching, remember June, July is breeding. So sometime in May, we go through April, May, we go through what's called a family unit breakup. And she actually just beats the fire out of these cubs. She's like, get out, you're yearlings now. I'm going to go back into estrus again. Big males are going to come around. And if big males catch cubs or yearlings, they kill them and eat them. Infanticide is extremely high in dense bear populations. So she wants to come back into estrus. She beats them up. And they're like, fine, I get the point. I'm going to, it's like kicking an 18-year-old out the door. And then they have to find their own way in the world. And what we find is these bears end up at the edges of the forest. They end up in all of our new communities. They end up in places like downtown Miami or Orlando because they're striking out to try to find their own home range. And we deal with that every single spring, the family unit breakup. So as they're looking, this whole cohort of bears where they were fairly secure with mom, because mom is pretty angry the whole time. You got cubs hanging on your head all day long. So, and she's trying to keep these cubs safe the entire time. So even big male bears, you don't want to tangle up with a female bear and her cubs. I think everybody in here has probably heard that before. Even the big males know that, okay? And I've actually seen a fight between a female bear and a large male who was attempting to get to her cubs, and she beat the fire out of him. I've never seen a 150-pound ball of rage like I've seen with this female bear. And this male was very large and determined to get her cubs. I was sitting on a balcony of this guy. He's like, this female keeps coming around every day, and I was sitting, I'm like, oh, there she is. And then all of a sudden, her cubs run up the tree. I'm like, well, what's that about? Next thing I know, here comes this male, and she leaves. And I'm like, okay, well, this is bad. I'm going to watch these cubs get eaten. So the male starts to climb the tree, and just as he gets his foot off the thing, she comes out of nowhere and just plows him off the side of the tree. He's like this, really vulnerable, and she just goes, bam, and just takes him like 10 feet rolling in a ball of rage. I've never seen anything like it in my life. And then he was just like, you're right, I'm out. And he just ran off. And then she just made a little vocalization, and the cubs came right down. And I'm sure they were like, "That was awesome, Mom." but yeah. So you really don't want to tangle up with a female and her cubs. They are very defensive of them. But then when the family unit breakup happens, they're on their own, and they're not secure with her anymore. And so they do get into quite a bit of trouble. we find that they are the ones who strike out and try to find the easiest source of food, dog food and garbage and that sort of thing. So normal black bear behavior is crepuscular. So everybody knows what diurnal is, right? You're active all day long. Everybody knows what nocturnal is. You're active all night long. Crepuscular means you're active at sunrise and sunset. So they're actually very what we call behaviorally flexible, because what ends up happening is their food source, and I'll talk about it in a second, are mostly berries. And unlike panthers, who are tied to the behavioral activity of their prey, right? So a panther can't take off like an evening if he's hungry, because the deer are active in the evening, right? And they're active in the morning. So a panther has to be tied into the activity of its prey. Berries don't run from you. So you can be lazy all day long, and you can sleep in your berry patch and then wake up and shove some berries in your mouth and then, go back to... So it's a much easier, it truly is like, the Jungle Book. So, but they can change their behavior to be more nocturnal when they get closer to people. They don't really like people, they don't want to be around people, so they will change their behavior to being more nocturnal if they're getting in the garbage. And then again, in the fall, they're eating like 18 hours of the day. So their diet is, they are true omnivores. They eat both plants and animals. Their diet is mostly made up of plants, berries, acorns, saw palmetto. The last 20% is made up of meat, but that is actually mostly made up of insects. So everybody knows that bears like honey, right? Actually, what bears are trying to get to are the larvae. So Winnie the Pooh has lied to you your entire life. So what they try to do is get down into there. So the honey is it's like putting honey on a big piece of raw steak, right? So they're trying to get those larvae to get that protein, and the honey happens to be, the extra sugar, that goes along with it. They of course do like honey, don't get me wrong. But when they're getting stung by 1,000 hornets, they're trying to get the larva. The honey is not worth it, unless it's Tupelo. I love Tupelo. So most aspects of their life it revolves around food. They're either eating, thinking about eating, planning their next, foray into eating something else. But they do have a flexible social structure. They communicate with each other, and they have a sense of personal space. So this is actually a really funny picture. There's a bear up the tree. You can see the bear. There's a little tiny cat at the very bottom of that tree. So really it's about attitude, right? Clearly that cat has a poor attitude. And from what the reports say is that cat actually chased the bear like 3 times up those trees. Every time the bear would run down, the cat would storm off the porch and chase the bear up another tree. So really, black bears in general are the flight species, right? They would rather run from you. They're really good at running away or climbing a tree. And the theories are black bears are so good at climbing trees and hiding and running because back in the Pleistocene, when we actually had these things called dire wolves, those are real, not just a made-up TV show thing. Dire wolves would actually catch and kill bears, brown bears and black bears. Well, if you're a black bear, and you could climb a tree and look around at the dumb wolves who can't climb trees, they're just going to do that. They're just going to look and hang out and watch the wolves starve to death. So the bears, they can climb trees, and they would mostly rather run. Okay. Now that changes when human foods start getting introduced into the equation. We'll talk about that in just a second. So here's actually an interesting video. This is a hunter, not even really sure where it's from. But there's a guy sitting up in his tree stand. A bear clearly is smelling him. He's smelling everything about, that this person here, but doesn't see the guy. Okay? Now listen to what he says, though. He does the exact perfect thing. So just listen for a second.
Hey, what are you doing? What are you doing there?
Yeah. it's almost embarrassment, right? I mean, if you have dogs, you've probably seen that look before. And so that is classic good wild bear behavior. The bear didn't turn into this rage machine and eat the guy. He said, hey, what do you do? I probably would have said that at the bottom rung, honestly. But he waited, and it's his tree stand. He says, hey, what are you doing to the bear? And the bear is like, ah, and then runs off. But the interesting thing to think about, which I think about, which is probably weird, is how many times is that bear sitting in that guy's tree stand when he's not in it? Because seriously, that's not the first time it's climbed that ladder. That was professional ladder climbing on that bear. So the other thing that we like to talk about is bears standing up as a threat. Lots of people have seen bears stand up at the end of their driveway, out in the forest. And let me tell you that in almost all cases, it is a bear trying to figure out where the threat is coming from. Because if you spend your entire life at this level, if you actually and you hear a stick break, a good thing to have is the advantage of standing up and being 6 feet tall and seeing where that threat is coming from. That is actually mostly curiosity and trying to figure out where the threat is coming from. I'm not saying that it doesn't, there couldn't be some threatening behavior at some times. Most of the time it's not aggressive. Here are the other critters that do the exact same thing. And I know you've all seen squirrels stand up and go, what's over there? And I guarantee you none of you have run in horror to your house, right? And grabbed your shotgun. Guarantee it. Because squirrels just aren't that intimidating. But when bears do it, all bets are off, right? Raccoons, my dog actually does it, so it's pretty impressive. So bears do stand up when they fight. So this is an actual bear fight in somebody's front yard in Longwood.
Is it likely two males that are fighting?
Two males fighting over a girl, classic. I mean, can't. So this is more like jujitsu, right? They're positioning, they're swatting, and really the dominance takes place when one gets the other one and actually kind of like forces his head down. You'll see it here in just a second. There'll be a point to the bear in black here in just a second. So the other thing pay attention to, there's no growling. Bears don't growl like lions do, right? That's all made for TV stuff. So here you go, the bear has now got leverage and he's pushing them back. And while it looks vicious and there's lots of spit and the bears will get bit, most of the time this is not to the death. This is just trying to establish dominance. In fact, I think the hedge takes the worst of the entire fight. So what bears will do, though, and this is very important for you all to pay attention to, is they do have warning displays. And those warning displays are basically bears trying to communicate with us to some degree that they're uncomfortable. They jaw pop and huff, and they will even bluff charge. I'm going to show you what that looks like in just a second. So we have two things called hot aggression, which is defensive, and cold aggression. And what I'm going to tell you is counterintuitive. The hot aggression, where you're looking at this bear and it's like, oh my gosh, this bear is really threatening, that is actually just intimidating behavior. That's actually the least amount of worry you should have. The cold aggression, which I'm going to show a video of, that is actually problematic behavior. So this is what hot aggression looks like. Now I keep an extra change of shorts in my truck just for this event right here. Okay, so the bear charges down on you, ears pinned back, jaw popping, huffing out. It is intimidating. Let me tell you, I've had it happen way too many times. But everything that bear is telling you right now is that it's really uncomfortable and you need to back off. And of course, we have opposable thumbs and this really impressive brain structure that we could just say, you're right, I'm going to just back off over here, and give you the garbage or the pet food or whatever this bear feels like it's defending. Now this is cold aggression.
Whoa!
No sound, except for the guy.
Look. Animation cat. Whoa!
Ears are up, watching intently what this guy is doing. He even starts to trot a little bit, coming towards him. Now the guy did everything right here, okay? Look, he stands his ground, he yells at the bear, he has a big stick in his hand, and the bear actually stops its advance and starts to break off. Now if you notice, that doesn't look all that threatening, but let me tell you, if that guy fell down, he would have had a bear on top of him, and that bear had ill intentions, okay? Everybody likes bears, but I'm here to tell you that they are carnivores. They are predators. They do kill and eat things. I do not want to sugarcoat that part of this talk for you, okay? And so what I want you guys to do, we're going to do a little quick exercise. If you feel comfortable, I want everybody to stand up for just a second. Okay? All right. So if there is a bear in your yard and it's approaching you, or you feel uncomfortable and it's just kind of standing there, this is what I want you to do. I want you to put your hands above your head. And I want you to say, wave them back and forth and say, "Hey, bear." Hey, bear. All right, that was weak. Let's do it one more time. I have kindergartners to do it way better, folks. Okay? All right. So I want you to really, you're not going to scare the animals, okay? I want you to say, give me, I'm the bear. In fact, I'm going to pretend like I'm a bear. When I turn and look at you, I want you to scare me, okay? So I'm the bear. I'm walking along, and then, oh, that was good. Perfect. Okay, you all sit down. Oh, that was great. In fact, I was a little scared. So, so that is cold aggression, okay? And we've documented that one time in the state of Florida, one time. I happened to actually witness it myself. It was a bear that actually was watching children playing down by a lake. And I was putting myself between the bear and the kids, and I had two dogs that showed up out of somewhere. We have no idea where these dogs came from. And they're standing there barking at this bear's face, and he could care less about the dogs, he could care less about me. He was so focused on the kids behind me that it was really actually scary. And then so we ended up, obviously, once I got the bear to move off into the bushes, we packed the kids up and stuck them in a van, and they drove away, everything was fine. But that is as close, I think, any of us have actually got to any kind of predatory situation in the state. Everything else has been defensive, okay? So I don't want you all to be scared of bears, but I do want you to have a very healthy respect for bears, okay? So again, if defensive, stand your ground, arms up. Hey, if it's predatory and if you're being touched by a bear, we want you to fight back. Poke them in the eyes. My plan, which you don't have to follow, my plan is to actually reach down their throat and grab the back of their tongue. Because nothing breaks your concentration like somebody sticking their hand in your mouth and grabbing the back of your tongue. And if any of you have dogs, go home and try that. Stick your hand down their mouth and grab their tongue. I guarantee you they don't want anything to do with you for like 2 hours. Okay, so that's my plan. I'll let you know how it works out. But definitely fight back, all right? So I'm going to go quickly a little bit through bear management fast. But we do population estimates. The way we do those is through hair snares. It's very clever science. We actually capture some hair on a barbed wire fence. We send it to a geneticist, and they actually can tell us how many bears we have in the forest based on some statistics. Really, really interesting stuff, and I encourage you to look it up on our website. We do know that we have around just over 4,000 bears in the state. We have 1,000 bears down here in the southern part of the state, which is up from like 500 back in 2004. And so our bear population is expanding actually pretty quickly. So we are very happy about having an expanding population. The issue with that, of course, is that now we have conflicts that we're dealing with as we have an expanding bear population. So a little bit of history. We think we had, before the state was settled, pre-Columbian, just over 11,500 bears. It's a big guess. We really have no idea how many bears lived here, but it's a guess that we made. We had, in 1974, we listed them as threatened species everywhere except for Apalachicola and Baker and Columbia counties. We actually continued to hunt bears as a game species all the way up until 1994. In 1994, we actually stopped the hunts for various reasons in Apalachicola and Baker and Columbia counties. And we did not have a hunting season until October of 2015, where we essentially had a one-day hunting season statewide where we harvested 304 bears. Since then, we actually have not had another hunting season after that. Now, will we ever again? I honestly don't know. You know, they are a game species. They are hunted in lots of other states. I think Pennsylvania harvests like almost 4,000, just 3,500 bears in like a 4-day hunt. Florida is one of the only states that doesn't harvest bears, but it's a different state. We have lots of social opinions and we respect those. So we are taking a break from any hunting in Florida. But the conflict of bears is something that we have to deal with every single day. And so as bears start to recover, we're in that green area. We are dealing with bears that are breaking into houses and doing some other stuff. And unfortunately, we, as the agency responsible for them, like we were talking about out there, we are responsible for public safety and managing the population. So we are dealing with that on a daily basis. If you look at the red dot, I live underneath of one of those red dots up by Ocala. Down here in Naples, the Naples area, Golden Gate Estates is one of our hot spots. But where there are people and bears, we have conflicts. That's just the fact of reality there. If you look at over time, our conflicts had spiked and then kind of dropped off a little bit over the years. We've leveled off a little bit, which is good. And this is what I was talking about earlier. Most of our conflicts, when you break them down, are general interactions. I saw a bear cross the street. But the actual true conflict is garbage related at 31%. That's a big deal. Now, the good thing about those two parts of the pie is both of those are fixable. We come here, we do education. We come to your HOA, we do education. We talk about the first part. If a bear is walking up your street, it's not that big of a deal. It's okay. Bears live here. We're going to, panthers live here. Coyotes live here. If they're not doing anything and passing through, it's the fact of living in Florida, okay? But if the bears are getting in your garbage, we could try the garbage cans like we have outside. We could try, are you smarter than the average bear? There's lots of things that we could do to eliminate those or reduce those parts of the pie. Okay, so we are actively trying to focus on that. Now, but once a bear starts getting human food, it's really hard to break them of that. So they become habituated, meaning they don't mind to be around people, which is not necessarily bad, but unsettling. But then when they become food conditioned, that's really bad. That means that they're actually looking for people to hand them food. And let me tell you, folks, there are a lot of people in the state of Florida who like to hand feed black bears. Okay? A lot of them. And of course it's illegal. And we are continuously trying to, make cases on those folks. But it's amazing the amount of people who really want to hand feed bears, okay? So this is a video that happened up in Longwood. So if you notice that big yawn, that's a nervous reaction to being in that situation. He's licking, he's yawning. Those are nervous signs. There's a lady sitting in her chair in her driveway taking this video. Okay? She was sitting there. I think she told me I don't know if it was Pokemon Go or something, but either way, it was something along those lines. And here this bear just showed up in front of her. Now, she didn't jump up like I had you guys do and say, "Hey, bear," because this bear is like 3 feet away, okay? So she sat there. She did the right thing. She sat there. She stayed calm. She started her video. I could tell, she was shaking in her boots. She told me she was very scared. She's trying to hold the camera still in video. And this bear doesn't look bad, right? It almost looks like a puppy that's waiting for food. Comes up, he sniffs her knee, right? And if you look at the bear's face, he's just like, well, are you going to hand me something or not? Right? And so he's clearly smelling, and she did exactly the right thing. She stayed totally cool and collected. You know, the bear comes up, actually smells her cheek. You'll see it here in just a second. Yeah. So if you notice, this bear's behavior it's really like a dog, right? It's expecting a food source from her. Now, there are people who have been feeding this bear. We haven't busted anybody for it, but they have signed this bear's death warrant. We cannot tolerate an animal in our population who is getting that close to people and expecting food resources. Now, we did not catch this bear, but that is danger, folks. We cannot have humans. I'm pleading with you, honestly. If you know people who are feeding bears, you could talk to them first, but if they continue and they food condition a bear like this, they are going to get the bear killed. No, there's no question about it. Okay, it's either going to be us that has to do it, or it's going to be a neighbor who is fed up of having the bear walk up to it and he's going to shoot it outright in his driveway. Okay, eventually that bear is going to end up dead, and it's simply because a person or multiple people have generated this animal to behave like that. It is unacceptable on all levels. All right, so. Again, we have a very large human population. We have actually 21 million, that slide's hold. Oh yeah, so 21 million people. We got like 10 million visitors a day. We've got lots of folks in the state of Florida. And really, anything that smells dog food, garbage, if you just keep that away, make it secure from bears, most of the time, problems go away. Here's a dumpster. We were talking about dumpsters earlier. This is a classic. This is actually from Fort Myers, this bear, getting in a dumpster. It may even have been your station. I'm not really sure. But if you've ever tried to pull the lid of a dumpster back with your teeth, it's very difficult. And this bear does it like it's nothing. So they're very powerful animals. And you can see he's trying to peel it back. It goes in, pops up. Now look how agile this animal is. That's about an inch of steel in all 4 feet. They're very cat-like. All 4 feet are on that inch of steel. If I tried to do that, I'd break my neck. So, and then we were talking about punching the lids in. This is exactly how it works right here. The bear just punches the lid in. So that is a problem. Dumpsters are an issue for us. This is actually from Colorado. This is kind of an interesting little take on it. This bear decided not to hang around. Maybe he had a date he was taking some takeout to. He just wheels the whole dumpster off. So I'm not really sure what that bear thought he was doing, but yeah, effective anyway. So again, the way we secure dumpsters is we put metal lids and metal sliding doors and a carabiner. Bears can't work carabiners because they don't have opposable thumbs, and then we're good to go. Most of the times your problems just go away. The other thing is we retrofit the plastic lids to have an H-bar underneath and a locking bar on top, and then the bears can't punch it through like we were talking about earlier. Now for residential garbage, the easiest and most cost-effective thing to do is just keep your garbage in your garage until the morning of pickup. We know that it stinks. Trust me, I know that it stinks. And lots of people will say, well, but I get, flies. Well, flies, bears, you're going to have to make a decision. But I mean, in all seriousness, we know that. We know that it's a problem keeping your garbage in your garage, but it is the right thing to do overall. And then, of course, there are other methods of trying to secure your garbage with some retrofit kits, which we have instructions online. Some sheds. There's lots of folks in the state who don't have a garage. So we have some plans online actually to build this wooden shed. You can keep your garbage in there, pretty effective. And then again, so the bear resistant, actual certified bear resistant garbage cans that are professionally made. We've actually been helping these companies for quite some time. That's actually the Kodiak one I was talking about earlier. The one over here is the Rerig one that you saw. And so these companies actually build these things, put them in with these brown bears, and if they survive 60 minutes, they become certified. So if any of you have like a Yeti cooler, you'll see a little silver sticker on it that says certified bear resistant. They had to go through this test with those grizzly bears out west. And then, of course, we actually test them in wild bears here in Florida. So like that's a wild bear. I think that's actually my garbage can that the bear's tearing to shreds at the bottom. The other thing, again, like I said, there's these sheds, and they are very effective at keeping bears out as well. That's a big bear, by the way. So here's an interesting video. That is a bear-resistant garbage can. The bear smells it, sniffs it, ignores it. Now watch what this bear does. Walks across the street, finds the weakest link. And the bear takes the garbage that's unsecured. And here's the really disappointing part about the whole thing. The bear takes the garbage into the backyard of the guy who has the bear-resistant garbage can. That's really unsettling to me. I'm not sure why. But, you know, this guy does all the right stuff, and he's still got to pick up his neighbor's garbage, right? But there is a real-life, you see it in-person example of a bear ignoring a bear-resistant garbage can and going to the garbage that's unsecure across the street, okay? So again, we test these for the companies, and again, if it doesn't work for you, it's never going to get used. So we try to use it, and have the trucks pick it up, and we test it with people to make sure that it's user-friendly, not just bear-resistant. And again, we've put them out in the field, and actually, that's your bear, right? Is that the male? Yeah. So we've actually put the some of these garbage cans in with our bears here, and let them roll them around and try them out. I don't know, we had the greatest food in there because he wasn't terribly interested that day. But but we also test them on wild bears here in Florida. So again, when we actually use them, so the bottom line there, when we put bear-resistant garbage cans out in the field, 95% success in reducing bear conflicts. When do you get a 95% success in anything, honestly? That's incredible, and people will, I was driving around one time when we were doing this study, and I was like, how's the can working? And the lady literally threatened me, do not take my can. And I'm like, I'm not here to take your can, I want to find out how it's working. She's like, well, and it's really impacted me. She said, well, my children are actually can play outside now. They could go outside, and I don't have to worry about bears, coming around sniffing through my garbage. That's a big deal, folks. I mean, that's a quality of life issue, really. So here's the part of Gary Kalidas' talk that I inserted into mine, and he does a fantastic job of sort of breaking down the rules and laws and liability. So there is a general liability called faire naturae, and essentially that says, the landowner, generally under the doctrine relating to animals that are wild, an owner or occupant of the land does not have an obligation to warn others about dangers of animals in their natural habitat or protect others from wild. Now this is in the wild, right? So then what he goes on to say is, notwithstanding that, if you know you have bears on your property and you're renting to somebody or an HOA, you have the responsibility to tell people that there are bears around and to do something about reducing conflicts. That's essentially what he's getting at here. The owner's breach of this duty can rise to the cause of action for negligence. That's a big deal. We don't want it to ever get anywhere near this, what Gary is trying to explain to us. Let's see. So an HOA can be held liable for injuries and damage. Can they? We don't know. It hasn't really been tested yet. But there was a settlement over that Tim was talking about water moccasins. And that actually is kind of opening the door for liability in some of these dangerous wildlife stuff. But an HOA should really take actions to reduce those conflicts. Okay? And again, Tim has it on the webpage. Please take a look at that if you're interested. He does an amazing job breaking it down. We're really happy with Gary. So again, we are working together with communities, with the counties. We actually had a meeting with Waste Management. We have a meeting tomorrow with Lee County, all talking about getting these bear-resistant garbage cans and ordinances and bear-wise communities all being put out into the South Florida area. So again, we actually have money that's coming in, and like I said earlier, Seminole County has gotten the lion's share, but we are giving out money to help offset the cost of these cans. And so far, we've given out almost $2.1 million to help get these initiatives out into the communities. So I'm wrapping up here, and I wanted to talk to you about two incidents that really strike home for me, okay? This happened in 2010. This is what we affectionately call Jarhead. This is a bear that stuck his head inside this jar and could not get, it's a plastic jar, and could not get it off. We heard about it, and what we discovered was it was a female bear that only had 3 legs, and she had 3 cubs, one of which had a jar stuck over its head. I'm not thinking Parenting of the Year award there, but either way, we stepped in, and I chased this bear cub for 10 solid days, wore me out completely, emotionally and physically. Eventually, what ended up happening was I saw them sitting in some bushes, and I laid down at the end of the trail. She came out. I free-range darted her. She jumped into the bushes. And I thought, oh, we're good. Now I've got her, we've got the cubs, awesome. Well, what ended up happening was the cub kind of poked his head around and was looking at me through this jar. And I'm like, I'll just jump on this cub. So I jumped up and I grabbed onto the cub, and I'm holding onto the jar, and he's like a Tasmanian devil, ah! And he's like shaking, and his head will not come out of I have the jar itself, and he will not come free of this jar. So of course I grab onto him, he scratches the fire out of me. And then I lose him, and he goes running off, and another biologist, his name is Brian Scheich. He's actually the research program coordinator now. I look up, and I see Brian flying through the air, like Superman. He's flying through the air, literally at eye level, and he jumps, and he grabs on to the back legs of this cub as it's running away. And of course, he lands in a blackberry thicket to do that. And so he is like screaming for multiple reasons. And so I run up, I grab the cub, and I've got this thing in a death grip, and it's kind of sitting still right now. And of course, it can't breathe very well because there's a jar stuck over its head. And so we take it to the truck, and he's literally puts his foot on my leg, and he's pulling on the jar, and I'm holding the cub, and this thing will not come off. If we didn't catch that cub, no question, it was going to die. There's no question that it was going to die. So of course, we stop, analyze the situation. I realize that every time he's pulling, its ears are coming forward and acting as like a locking mechanism. So of course, I stick my hand up into the jar, and I pull its ears back, and he pulls, and pop comes off the jar. And I am super excited until the bear bites me in the hand as hard as it possibly can and sticks his teeth through my hand. And then, of course, now I'm thinking bad thoughts, and I'm going, ow, get this bear off me, ow! You know, and he's literally attached to my arm like a giant spider. I'm like trying to get him off me, swinging around, and he's biting me and scratching. And finally, he goes flying off, hits the ground, and runs off. And we go and collect Mom, put her in a trap, and within 15, 20 minutes, all 3 cubs come, they start nursing, we catch them all. By the next morning, we kept them overnight, and by the next morning, you couldn't even tell which cub it was. That is how impressive and resilient bears are. And so that was you know, that actually I actually made a book. Jeff Klinkenberg wrote a story in the book about this whole thing. And then what happened, and so here they are in the cage, and this is them running away after we released them the next day. Everything was good. And we still hear about her. She still has 3 legs. She didn't grow one. And so we hear about her every once in a while. And then this just happened, assuming I could get it to click over, the other day. I think Tim's in the way. Oh, there it is. So now this is brand new. This happened just in September, called Operation Cheese Ball, because it was a cheese ball container that was stuck over his head, and her and her sibling. And we ended up showing up, and we caught the mother right away, which was really good, because once we have the mom, we have the cubs. It's just a matter of time, and you have to have patience. But this is how it all went down. So here's the video. There's the bear with the cheese ball container. Looking around. I'm almost done, Tim. So even though it has a cheese ball container, the sibling is still not very nice to it. So mom is now actually in a trap next to this one. And we have some food in there. And what's really sad is you can see the sibling is just scarfing down donuts, right? And here's the one with the container over its head. It's like pushing its container into the... It's really terribly sad. I hate to make it funny. But we caught them. And you can see that, in fact, the sibling is still eating donuts, even though they're captured. And instead of darting them, I actually slid the catch pole through, and I gripped onto the jar. Now, think about how hard it is to get this thing off. I've got that locked tight, and this bear is pulling desperately to get that off of its head. So you can tell the biologist, let me tell you, That's Janelle. That's Janelle, Sarah's counterpart up in the north central region. So then that night we actually went ahead and turned them loose. There's the cubs and mom, and
Go, girl. Go. Go get him.
Yeah, and that was it. Operation Cheese Ball. And let me tell you that the reason, thanks. The reason why I show those is because when I'm talking about securing your trash, I mean, it's as simple as that container that's going to end a bear's life. And we really, I mean, I show those videos to kids because let me tell you how many parents come up to me angry at festivals saying, my kids will not let me put the garbage out until the morning of because you came into their school and you said, if we buy cheese balls, we've got to cut it in 45 different things. And so kids are very serious about saving cubs like this. So anyway, that's it. Thanks.